The memory of me finding Grandia and falling in love with the game is one of my fondest memories from like 2000 to 2001. I think I've mentioned in previous videos that my parents did not have a lot of money whilst I was growing up, so but getting video games was a birthday and Christmas affair, and the odd cheap one throughout the year. So there were times, of course, where we'd be going out and I would beg and plead for a game or something, and of course my parents just couldn't afford it. It's not they didn't want to get me one, and as an adult with my own children, I completely understand that now. But with Grandia, it was just an amazing day, basically. I think I went to school that day. It may have been summer holidays. It could have been a weekend. I can't quite remember. But all I remember is walking into a shop, just a little corner shop here in the UK, just a little convenience store, and they used to have a cardboard like a rack, like a little cardboard rack on the counter next to the checkout, and they used to have games, PlayStation games in there for £10. I mean, it's mental when you think that Grandia was sat in there for £10 when no, it's still like, I think it's like the cheapest is 30 quid, and that's for a PlayStation game that's like rocking up to, well, 25 years old maybe, which is insanely crazy. And of course you can play Grandia now on PC, Nintendo Switch and PlayStation, which is incredibly cool. But there it was, and of course it had Justin on the front and Sue and Fina, and a very anime-esque looking cover, and that attracted me because of Final Fantasy VII in the mid-90s was mid to late 90s was my first entry into JRPGs. I fell in love with JRPGs, so anything that looked anime-esque on a PlayStation cover generally at that time was a JRPG, so I got quite excited. However, all I did was just pick it up and look at the back of the box, and then my mother just out of the blue asked if I wanted that game, which of course I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love it, thank you. And she bought me that game. And then I remember that we went to a family member's house, so I was clutching this game, reading the manual, as we did back in the day, just poring over the manual, reading about the little biographies on the characters and all the other stuff, and could not wait to get home to play the game. And when I did, and you get that opening music, and then you get all the you're in Parham Town, and then you get to the combat, and then I just absolutely fell in love with the game. And the fact that I got that game from just having a look at it and my mum saying, hey, do you want it? That was fantastic. And of course this was a time where the internet was about, but it was wank, and it was mainly word of mouth or magazines where you got your information for video games, and I knew nothing. I didn't even know Grandia existed. And when it first released in 1997, it came out for the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation, but when it first came out, it was being advertised as the Final Fantasy VII killer, which of course it wasn't. However, it's still a great game in its own right, and is still one of my favourites that I replay super regularly. And if you're thinking of picking it up, pick it up. I'll make a separate video on the ins and outs of the game completely, because I love Grandia, and I want to make content on it, talking about it, because it's just one of those games that I'm incredibly enthusiastic about. However, this story does take a weird turn, because I think I got the game in 2000, like I said, 2001. Now in like 2003, a friend of mine called Carl, he was talking to me about it. He didn't know what the name was, but what he was describing was Grandia. And of course I said to him, I think you're talking about Grandia. And then I brought it into school the following day. And then he basically begged me to borrow it, and he would lend me Final Fantasy IX, which at that point I had not played. Of course, I was 7 all the way, and Final Fantasy VIII I'd only seen over friends' houses, and I've never really gravitated towards Final Fantasy VIII. But he wanted to lend me Final Fantasy IX for Grandia, which I thought was a great idea, cool, no problem. So I followed him home that day. We traded games. Everything was cool. I took Final Fantasy IX home, and if you've played Final Fantasy IX, you know at the beginning of the game, you get to a certain point where Zidane is chasing Princess Garnet or Dagger, around the castle, Alexandria Castle, and she grabs, in a cutscene, she grabs hold of some bunting and jumps off of the top of it and swings. Now, when that happens, the game froze and kept freezing, and unfortunately, because of that, I couldn't continue playing that evening, which was really annoying. Now, I went to school the next day and said, it's not working, mate. And all he said was, and this is classic video gaming, he just said, well, all you got to do is just open up the PlayStation lid and close it again when that happens and it'll work. And lo and behold, that evening I did that and it worked, and that was cool. And I continued on to play Final Fantasy IX. But then I think a few months passed and I wanted Grandia back, but I think his parents were separating and he had to move house with one of his parents, I can't quite remember, and he said, look, I can't find it, keep Final Fantasy IX, which in some respects is a fair trade, but Grandia was very special to me. And then Grandia fell out of thought and mind, kind of like the One Ring, because that was it was gone. And the years went by until I picked up a PSP, and then because I wasn't really into online gaming a lot before Halo 3, and then when a friend of mine said, oh, but you can get PlayStation 1 games on your PSP through the store, I did that, and I was browsing through and I found Grandia on there, and it blew my mind, and then that was it. And then every time Grandia comes out on something, especially, that's why I'm so happy we got these HD remasters on PC and Nintendo Switch, and I have them on both PC and Switch. This is PC footage I've captured here, but I was so happy to get it back, and I can play it whenever I want digitally on my PC or on my well, I would play it on my Steam Deck if it worked. It doesn't work on Steam Deck, unfortunately, which sucks dick. However, I can play it on my Switch if I fancy playing it portably. But that's it. That's basically a condensed version of my Grandia story of how I found the game, how I fell in love with the game, and then how I subsequently lent the game and lost the game. So there you go. That's a tragic Greek story. But please let me know in the comments down below if you've played Grandia, or if there's any game that's happened to you, or any games you've lent out to friends and then you've never seen them again. And as always, thank you very much for watching.